what should this government be doing at this stage in the pandemic, given that it's already passed three gigantic relief packages of sorts through the Congress?
Well, we used a fire hose to try to deal with the fire, but we didn't target it very well. So, yes, we spent $3 trillion, but that was supposed to protect the most vulnerable, to provide the wherewithal for family, those who are sick, not to go to work, to prevent the growth of unemployment. We have to say, after all these weeks, we failed in important ways in each of those objectives. The unemployment rate, Representative Jayapal was describing, how high it's gone. We were supposed to make sure that people stay connected with their employer for all the reasons she pointed out, and we failed. And the result is we put an unacceptable burden on our unemployment system, and they've not been able to cope. And so every day there are stories of so many people applying for unemployment insurance and not being able to get it. And all of this means that when the pandemic is brought under control, we are going not to be in a good position to restart the economy.
And what needs to change in order for that to happen? Obviously, in whatever is the next round of legislation, you would like better targeting. What's an example of better targeting?
Well, Representative Jayapal's proposal is one example. And as she pointed out, there is bipartisan support on both houses of Congress. It was the kind of proposal that I had advocated before they passed the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, which in its very design, it was destined to failure. Relying on the banks to funnel money was predictable what would happen. Those who are better connected with the banks would be the ones who got the money, not the people who needed it the most. And we've seen the disaster that is associated with that program. We also need to be more comprehensive, and I think we have to have a vision of what kind of an economy we want to emerge after the crisis. So, for instance, the states and localities are at the forefront in fighting the disease, but also in our education, our state universities. They're going to be facing enormous strain. The revenues are plummeting. In the 2008 crisis, the revenues plummeted twice the rate at which GDP fell. And they have a balanced budget framework, which means when the revenues go down, they have to cut expenditures. That alone will be enough to keep us in a recession. And yet, there is a reluctance on the part of some to provide any help for the states and localities. We ought to be thinking about a green economy. We know we have to make a transition to a green economy, and we could have used this moment when there's massive government intervention in the economy to steer the economy towards a greener economy. We haven't done that. Other countries have done all the things I've talked about. I was just talking the other day to one of the ministers in the New Zealand government, and they too have adopted a program very much like Representative Jayapal, and it's worked fantastically well. It's kept the unemployment down, and as you may know, New Zealand is one of the countries that has almost wiped out the disease because they got strong citizen support for staying at home and obeying the rules. And it's worked on all the accounts, on both the health account and on the economy account. So they've been a winner in both ways, and we should have followed some of those ideas.
Dr. Jar, what is your reading of the World Health Organization's role in this situation, and what would it mean for the United States to withhold funding and, of course, there's no such thing as permanent. Donald Trump is only president until January 20th, and possibly beyond that, we don't know. But Congress has a role here, too. And so this is at most a temporary withholding of that funding.
Yeah. So, Lawrence, thanks for having me on. First of all, I think the idea of holding funding from the most consequential global health agency in the middle of the most important pandemic in a century strikes me as incredibly unwise, not just for the world, but also specifically for the United States. Much of the world relies on WHO's expertise and guidance to fight disease outbreaks like the coronavirus outbreak. WHO is running the largest clinical trial of medicines in the world, the Solidarity Trial. And the idea that we're going to walk away from that would leave us looking weak. I think others would step in with the funding and really would be incredibly damaging to the entire global effort. I think this is pretty unwise for the president to be threatening to do this, and even worse if he actually follows through.
So you seem to have the feeling that when people need money, they actually need money, and the best way to deliver it is through their employers.
That's right. I mean, what we're talking about right now is stopping mass unemployment, which is killing this country right now. We've got 37 million people who have filed for unemployment just in the last 8 weeks. And what this act would do is it would say the federal government will ensure that you continue to get paychecks, that we put money in people's pockets, and that we allow businesses to survive this crisis. This is the approach that many European countries have taken, also South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia. And it's really the most streamlined way to both make sure that we have a faster economic recovery if we stop this mass unemployment that's happening, to keep as many people off of unemployment insurance as possible so that we don't overwhelm the system, and to make sure that there is certainty and scale for these workers and these businesses, because there is too much uncertainty right now, and this program would help to provide some of that.
Yeah, and you've got a streamlined delivery system by going through the employer. You're keeping the employer alive. So many of these, we see the unemployment numbers that are staggering, but they are unemployed by businesses who are losing business and are losing their ability to stay in business. So you're trying to address both of those things at the same time.
That's exactly right, because we think this is a really important factor of our economy, the productive relationship between workers and businesses. That job is critical. And of course, as you said in your summary at the beginning, this would also keep workers on their health care, because we know that at this moment, 27 million Americans have lost not only their job, but their health care in the midst of a pandemic. That number is projected to increase. So by doing this very streamlined approach, we preserve that relationship between businesses and workers. We allow the businesses to continue to operate so they don't have to make that decision about permanently shuttering, which is happening to so many. And we make sure that there's no Hunger Games going on where a bank or the Treasury Secretary or the Trump administration gets to pick winners and losers between businesses. Everyone gets to qualify for this, and it would cover 36 million workers. And again, I think it also addresses both the public health piece of this as well as the economic piece, because if we want to beat the virus, we do need people to stay home until they have contact tracing, testing, isolation capacities in place. If we want people to stay home and follow public health guidance, then we must make sure that we are relieving the economic pressure on workers so they can pay their rent, pay their mortgage, put food on the table, and that we allow businesses to continue to stay open.